This episode is brought to you by Marantz Model 40N, ISA's Smart Amplifier of the Year. The most musical sound, simplified.
Today we're talking about the smallest loudspeaker that I've reviewed for many years, actually since the first generation of this loudspeaker. Today we're talking about the second generation LSX from KEF. It's called the LSX II. Let's go. So what's new? Well, the UniQ driver array 11th gen is still the same. We've got an 11.5 centimeter aluminium magnesium alloy mid-bass driver surrounding a 1.9 centimeter aluminium tweeter. You get aluminum if you live in the USA. And it's a coaxially arranged driver system. And that coaxial arrangement is designed to optimize the driver cohesion. So basically where the tweeter crosses over into the mid-bass driver, amongst other things. Because this is an active loudspeaker, we get the same as the Gen 1, the same 70 watt Class D amplifier applied to the mid-bass driver and the same 30 watt Class D amplifier applied to the tweeter. That's in each loudspeaker. And then they talk to each other over a proprietary wireless connection, for which I think we get 24-bit 48. But if you want higher than that, if you want to go 24 or 192 and get actually a slightly better sound, you can use an Ethernet cable as the interlink between the speakers. I did most of my listening with that Ethernet interlink in place, but today it's not there. I'm just using wireless. And head of acoustics at KEF, Jack Brown, tells me that even though the driver's the same and the amp's the same, they rebuilt the crossover in DSP from scratch for this new model. And I still have a pair of the originals here, so I could do a quick side-by-side comparison. The delta is not enormous. It's what we might call an audiophile difference between the two. In that, the LSX II gives us a slight lift in overall clarity and maybe a little bit more bass punch. But that's pretty much it. The biggest changes with the LSX II is that this loudspeaker was built around KEF's new W2 streaming platform. And that means inside the speaker we get capabilities for, I've got to get all this right, Room Ready, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Apple AirPlay 2, Google Chromecast. So it's kind of unusual to see so many things in one box. And then we get support for other streaming services, including Cobas, inside the associated KEF Connect app. And that KEF Connect app, I think, is a Sonos grade app. I think it's fantastic. It really is very good. If you want to see more details on that, check out my video about the LS50 Wireless II. I'll put a link in the description box below. But it's the inclusion here of an HDMI eARC socket that really positions the LSX II as a proper soundbar replacement. Now the LSX II's bass is plenty punchy, especially in the mid bass, but it's not going to go as low as even a fairly average pair of stand mount loudspeakers. It's certainly not going to go as low as a subwoofer, and it might not go as low as many soundbars. And I think KEF rate the LSX II as -3 dB down at 54 Hertz. Behind me here, you can see the LSX II on their matching stands, also made by KEF, obviously. But I started out with the LSX II on my Kallax unit, playing, I think, some YouTube videos actually. And I did note that the LSX II have a highly lucid way with vocals or with voices, like really super crisp, super clean. And that, I guess that crispness that I talk about, which is a bit of a tech tuber cliche, you also, yeah, that comes really from the upper mids. There's a little bit of, well, a good amount of crisp crunch in those upper mids, which really I guess, help with vocal intelligibility. And with music, they nicely communicate the recording space. And then back watching Netflix and Disney Plus, although I'm going to cancel that soon because it's just too much of a Marvel and Star Wars fest. But when you're watching like a TV drama, like Slow Horses, which is a great TV show, you really kind of get a sense of the ambience if it's an outdoor shoot, you know, of, I guess, like wind or background noise. So it's really good for, I guess, for the mid-range spaciousness of both music and movies and TV watching. And we also get to hear into sort of the peripheries of the sound field with music and TV watching. And that really, to me, channels, I think, the one key advantage that the LSX II have over most soundbars, and that's proper stereo separation, because they're physically separated. So the LSX II's positioning is going to be wider than any soundbar, unless you've got like a 2 meter wide soundbar. Does such a thing exist? I don't really know. And that stereo width combined with the clarity works wonders with the percussive start of an Andy Stott track that I was playing the other week. It's called Science and Industry. And for a piece of music like that, stereo separation, physical, like having a proper sound stage in front of you, is fundamental to me, to the listening experience. So if you listen to more music than you watch TV, I literally implore you, please don't go straight in for a soundbar. Please go and listen to a proper hi-fi system with proper separated loudspeakers like these. It doesn't even have to be these loudspeakers. Just go and listen to, 2 stand mount loudspeakers and an amplifier and maybe a sub. And it might cost you more, but then again, it might not, because soundbars are pretty pricey these days, especially the high-end ones. So just go and investigate this if you're more of a music fan than you are, say, a movies and TV fan. It's not only the LSX that have evolved, it's also, I guess, my ability to communicate what I hear, but also this room has changed since the first LSX came out and we covered it. I'm still in the same 6 meter by 5 meter space, but this room is now acoustically treated, especially for, let's say, the mid bass and above. So the reverb is properly managed now. And if you've seen my video about my neighbor's room, which is the mirror of this, with a much, much longer reverb time of, 0.7 seconds minimum. And it kind of goes up and down, which is, not great. And you can hear it. And so this room is different. And I think maybe because of those treatments, the LSX II have a harder time coupling to this room and driving the room, because they're only a little mini monitor. And maybe in the past, I was benefiting from the room's reverb to sort of carry the sound of the original LSX forward. But in this room, with the LSX II on the Kallax unit, I didn't really feel that the sound was meeting the room properly. It felt like I'm sitting here and the sound is like over there and a little bit distant, a bit actually like, it reminded me of listening a little bit to the Sonos Arc soundbar. But if we get the LSX II off the Kallax unit, so lower down, and then higher up onto their custom stands, the S1 stands made by KEF, then it really does improve the sound when I'm listening to music. But one thing I love about these stands, well, 2 things actually, is that they really do mainline the sort of minimal aesthetic of the entire package. I think they really do enhance the visual appeal of the LSX II. And the second thing I like about them is that you can also route the cables in from below. So they solve an active speaker's #1 problem, and that's the cable vomit coming off the back of one or even both loudspeakers. So if you're a minimalist obsessive, the LSX II are really going to work for you with the stands, with the S1 stands. But if we dig into sound quality with music a little bit more, I did notice that the LSX II seemed to be better suited to simpler music, like Joanna Newsom, or maybe the solo piano works of Niels Frahm. And the crystalline clarity with which they deliver Niels Frahm or Joanna Newsom is just fantastic. It makes music sound so pure And the KEF sound cleaner and fresher than the SVS Prime Wireless Pro streaming active loudspeaker that we reviewed a few months ago. And they also draw a deeper soundstage than the SVS. So I'm talking about, you've got two speakers here, this is the soundstage, and then it has a certain artificial depth to it. And I think it's possibly because of the coaxial driver arrangement on the KEF that makes them really good at soundstage depth. But relative to the Prime Wireless Pro, the LSX2, I think, are more easily tripped up by complex material, in that the bass can get congested pretty easily with a fairly complicated track, maybe say from Banco de Gaia or Aphex Twin, and it gets even worse if we try and crank the volume in this room. And I say in this room is because I think the room is part of the issue here. Because I think with this being a treated room now, 6 meters by 5 meters might be too large for these loudspeakers to play music to a satisfying degree at anything but fairly low listening levels. And because the SVS is a weightier sounding loudspeaker with a fuller low end and can better drive this room, I think it's a better fit for this space. Even though the SVS has a face only a mother could love, and the LSX2 is by far the better looking speaker here. Only by adding KEF's KC62 subwoofer, well, you could use any subwoofer really, but I use the KC62. Only by adding that do we remove this, I guess, low frequency congestion, because the subwoofer is now handling it, and putting the KC62 with the LSX2, we really do get an audiophile level wow moment. I mean, I guess audiophile level is kind of one of those nebulous terms, but it is something that I'd say was on par with many of the things that I listen to here, many of the high-end products I listen to here. But that then brings us to, I guess, the biggest challenge that the KEF LSX2 have, or the biggest issue that I have with them, and that's price. Because for all of their aesthetic compromises, the SVS sell for almost half the price of the LSX2, which sell for, in Germany, 1,500 euros a pair. And then if we add the S1 stands, the stands you see behind me, that's another 300, so that brings us to 1,800. And then if we add the KC62 subwoofer, that's another 1,700. So we're looking at 3,500 to get that audiophile grade wow moment. That's a lot of green. That kind of money puts would-be LS50 platform buyers at a bit of a crossroads, I think. So here's my advice, is that if you're more of a movies and TV kind of person, I would go for the LSX2 and pair it with the KC62, because you get all the low-end excitement that you probably want from an action movie, and you get really superb vocal intelligibility, can't even say that word, which is kind of ironic, with the little mini monitors here, but you get a very visually unobtrusive package. However, if you're more of a music fan like me, then I would recommend that you go for a pair of LS50, either the Meta or the Wireless 2, and then add a subwoofer when you can afford it. And it might not even be the KC62, because from the outset, the LS50 Meta better drive this room, and I don't need a subwoofer straight away. And I just think there are more, well, no, I think, I know that the LS50 are obviously, well, is it obvious? Yeah, I guess. The thing is, the LS50 Meta sell for slightly less than the LSX2 on their own. So it doesn't take much of an amp. You could probably get a reasonably good, like an Audio Lab amplifier or something like that, or a Rotel, and drive them and maybe come in at under $2,000 and be very close to the LSX2 with the stands. Man, it's getting complicated. And still have a better result than the LSX2, even though your amplifier and your separate speakers are going to be more of a physical intrusion. But I think that's the price you have to pay if you want good sound, especially if you want good sound from music playback. I'm not really a home theater kind of person, so I'm just talking about this from the perspective of somebody who does mostly music listening with a little bit of TV and movies in the evening. Now we come to a side-by-side comparison with the $1,500 Futurefy system that we introduced in the previous video. And this video is why I made that video, because I think the LSX2 give us greater clarity, pretty much top to bottom, apart from the bass actually, than the Q150. But the Q150 bizarrely sound larger and I guess more open and a little bit more dynamically expressive. And that's probably just because it's a larger loudspeaker. And that's also true of the bass. It feels like that with the Q150 system, that the bass notes that we hear have more room to breathe, even though on paper, it looks like the Q150 only give us an extra few hertz of deep bass mining than the LSX2. But it seems to come more easily to the Q150. So what I'm saying here is the LSX2, even though it has far better top to bottom transparency, it can't match the Q150 in soundstage size, nor in the effortlessness with which the passive loudspeakers draw it. And the Q150 can also play louder before any congestion shows up. I've seen some people say that the KEF Q150, the white passives, would make great desktop loudspeakers. But I don't know what kind of desk sizes you guys have in America. I mean, are they like everything in America, like just bigger and badder? Because my desk is what, like this wide? There's no way it would physically accommodate a pair of Q150, and there's no way it would accommodate them from an audible or a sonic point of view. There'd just be too much bass rumble on the desk. It's like when people talk about the LS50 as desktop speakers, literal desktop speakers. I'm like, no, it's not going to work. But that's not true of the LSX2, and that's one of its key advantages, isn't it? Is that this is a streaming active loudspeaker that you can very comfortably accommodate on a desktop. And the inclusion of a USB-C input on this newer model really, for me, seals the deal. So you can hook them straight into a PC or a Mac. So yeah, so the LSX2, once this review is done, are going to go onto my desktop, because then I don't have to worry about having a separate amplifier or anything like that. It's just two speakers with all the amps and the streaming smarts built in, and then a USB-C connection for when I want to, I guess, relay my computer's audio, like when I'm editing videos, to those loudspeakers. But it's also the in-app EQ settings inside the KEF Connect app that make desktop placement so easy and so customizable. So if I find I'm getting too much bass from the LSX2 on the desktop, I can use the app to dial it back. And it has a specific desktop setting. So if you're not like an advanced user, you can just punch that in the basic settings screen, and you're pretty much good to go. And those EQ settings also work in tighter corners in, say, bedrooms or studies or even kitchens, in that you can adjust the output of the LSX2 according to their placement, whether they're near a rear wall or near a side wall or both. And to me, that really underscores the LSX2's primary purpose, or rather primary purposes. Number one, this is a small room loudspeaker for rooms smaller than this one. So maybe a 2 meter by 3 meter bedroom or study or spare room, or yeah, just if you live in a smaller apartment. I mean, this apartment's not huge, but I know people who live in much smaller spaces than this, and it would be a perfect fit for those kinds of rooms. It would also be a perfect fit for desktop use, or on a low board as a pseudo soundbar replacement, although I'm not sure that the low end is going to satisfy people who watch a lot of action movies, and really I think a sub is kind of essential there. And what's great about the LSX2 is you can connect the sub directly to the back of the primary loudspeaker, and then adjust the settings in the app. But if you're somebody who really thrives on, I guess, dialogue-driven movies or character-driven movies more so than action movies, and I think you'll find the LSX2 will be more than enough to satisfy your TV viewing needs. And you won't necessarily need the low end that a soundbar might give you. But the LSX2 aren't just a pair of loudspeakers like the Q150, because the Q150 need an amplifier, and that can introduce all sorts of anxieties about which amplifier sounds best with those loudspeakers, right? Or which amplifier has those particular streaming inputs or HDMI ARC or stuff like that. And you don't have to worry about that with the baby KEFs, because everything's built in. The streaming inputs are built in, the amplifiers are built in, everything's there. So when you get them in a box, which is about this big, you just pull them out, plug them in, and you're up and running in, what, 5 minutes? And the stands are a piece of cake to put together, maybe 5 minutes on those as well. So yeah, you're up and running with a very, very, very attractive, small hi-fi system for, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, these speakers really are, I think, expensive. And they do look like a luxury product because of the design work done on them by Michael Young, but we really pay for that. So yeah, if you like this video, please give us a like down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. It's not dual concentric, it's one concentric, as in, no, forget about that. And the head, and chief engineer, no. But it's the inclusion in the LS, no. Now, this is where things get a little bit difficult to, no. Now, bass is plenty punchy, especially in, now the LSX2's bass is plenty punchy because they're only a little baby mini monitor. But if we get the LSX2 off the Kallax, the low board, and then onto the, oh God. I recommend going for the extreme vocal intelligibility of the KC, no, and the stands, a piece of piss to put together in the, oh God, what am I saying here? This is